Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman.
What's happening, Tyler Gould?
Man, just spent some time with Lupe Cordova tonight.
Cordova, Mr. Cordova.
Mr. Cordova was he came strong tonight. He delivered tonight, and I got some notes that I wrote down and some people that I wrote down that I just think like he just gave us a list of guests as well. With
how many times are we going to be able to say? Because we've been doing this for a little bit, right? I mean. Yeah. We're getting up around 30 episodes. How many times are we going to be able to say tonight's guest shared a story you haven't heard yet?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's funny. You would think that we'd start to have some reruns, but
we got some commonalities and we got some themes, sure. And we're always big on that. But it seems like everybody's story. It kind of sounds cliche that everyone's story is unique. Guess what? Everyone's story is unique.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I loved, I wrote down in the middle of him talking tonight that I love his heart. And I just thought this guy is the definition of love and the definition of give. What stood out to you about Lupe tonight?
Okay, man. You know that feeling, when you throw on an old pair of jeans or something and you reach in the pocket and you pull it and there's a $20 bill.
Love that.
Love that feeling. I'm hanging out with Lupe Cordova in a professional setting, and we're talking, and I know his story a little bit. He knows my story a little bit. He starts sharing some things, and it was like, oh my goodness, your face flashes in front of me, in front of my eyes, and I'm like, I got to get this guy in the bag for the show. Right? He's the richest man in town. I love his heart too, but that heart is genetic. He's coming from some people that have an instinct to love and an instinct to exercise faith when most people wouldn't. Right? When most people would be going through bitter situations or difficult times, and they would be alienating themselves from faith. From light, from truth. Lupe has got it in his heart, almost like it is as a genetic code, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important that for me, Mike, this is one of the big pieces of this show, right? Is that we can examine maybe from afar some of those hard things and see how we might get through those hard things. Or we can also look back on the hard things we went through and find some camaraderie with some of these guests that have gone through it and found their way, maybe a little differently than we did, but found their way and still maintained their faith and their zest for life, right?
Yeah, I love listening to Lupe's story. Lupe shows you how to not forget who you are. Yeah. But not relish in past transgressions. And if you think about it, that's a tricky balance, right? We want to remember who we are. We want to remember that thing that God changed. We don't want to necessarily love that old way of doing things. And Lupe's story, Lupe's journey is wild. Is miraculous, but it matches up with some of mine. It matches up with some of yours.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is he's letting God prevail in his life. When God asks him to do something, or he feels that prompting, he may not be like immediate. He may try to squash it. He may throw up some resistance. He may ask some questions, but in the end, he understands. He says things, right? God has a different plan for me.
Yeah.
He says things like God loves me where I'm at.
Yeah.
Those are powerful lessons.
Those are powerful lessons. And I think it's good for all of us to see how someone else navigates those choppy waters and gets to the destination. We've been through some stuff, Mike, you and I, in our own personal lives. And we'll go through some more, that's it. Right. And so to be able to sit and surround ourselves with people that can show us the way or a way to navigate that. I thought tonight was full of invaluable lessons.
To be in church with a bitter heart.
Yeah.
Think about that. Because you have a thing that you want, that everything God teaches says that's a worthy, righteous thing to want.
Yeah.
And you're not getting it.
Yeah.
That's
I was just impressed. I mean, like I said, I feel like I say this all the time after every time we go through through the experience with our guests, but I have a ton of notes, man. And I really I'm eyeballing things. I circled some things that I want to apply
give me one.
Lupe was,
give me
I
one. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, when Lupe says the more you love, the more you're loved. And I love that. Like, I mean, I know that principle, but when he verbalized that, I just thought, you know what? I want to love more. I want to be more intentional about telling people I love them. People need to know that, and I mean extending that beyond, my own family. I walk in the door, my kids, they I tell them 100 times a day, but I need to tell the other people in my life that I love them, that they're important.
See, that's what I'm taking. He shares an experience, and I don't want to be a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Right. He shares an experience where one conversation.
Yeah.
In a work setting.
Yeah.
Sets him on a different course.
Yeah.
I want to be the guy that gives the one conversation. And like we share in the space before Lupe even comes in, I want to do it for the right reason.
Yeah.
I want to do it not to have the t-shirt that says, "Hey, I changed that guy's life." Yeah. But because I love that guy.
Right.
And I see something, or God tells me something.
I recognize for what they
I believe something that person doesn't even believe about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to verbalize it, and I'm going to try to do that every time in memory of what Lupe shares tonight.
Amen. Shout out to Mike from Shipping. Come on.
Come on, Mike from Shipping. Get on the show.
Get on. Hey. That's good stuff, man. I appreciate you introducing me to Lupe Cordova tonight, Mike. I mean, I didn't know Lupe, and I'm glad I know him. I am richer tonight for the few hours that I got to spend with Lupe Cordova.
And I really hope that our listeners will give him the time that he deserves. This is not easy. Hey, we got a podcast. Hey, we're going to put a microphone in your face. Hey, we're going to record you, and we're going to blast it out for the world forever to listen to. That's not an easy invitation. No. And Lupe, bless his heart, mustered up some courage, overcame those nerves, and freaking killed it tonight.
Yeah.
And I really hope that our listeners will take something, put it in their life immediately, and begin to just change, to be better, right? Better, stronger together, so that we can be the richest men in town.
Amen. We spent 2 hours with Lupe, and I will say this: it's not easy for our listeners sometimes to carve out 2 hours of their lives.
What are you going to cut, though? Think about the last 2 hours you had.
I wouldn't trade it for the world.
We're not cutting anything.
No. Take the week, digest Lupe Cordova. Do it in small bites if you have to, but listen to every word, because there's some powerful stuff. So listen, Mike Freeman, it was a good night. It was it's been a good week of work for the richest men in town. and I'm looking forward.
Exciting things to
and
come.
We'll talk about those on upcoming episodes, because I think that there's some things that we want our listeners to be excited about with us, and we're excited to share you some of the new things that we're going to be doing with Richest Men in Town. But for tonight, sit back, relax, enjoy Lupe Cordova on the Richest Men in Town.
Tyler Gould, what's happening, brother?
Mike Freeman. It's another night on the Richest Men in Town. I'm excited about tonight, man.
It's Thursday night, and we've got another amazing guy coming. Lupe Cordova is going to be our guest. Looking forward to the conversation. Yeah. We had a great pre-show call with him. He's one of those. He's nervous.
Yeah, well,
he's going to kill it. He's going to be great.
You're an intimidating guy, and
you know what? I get that a lot.
Yeah, I figured you did, man.
I think it's my large physical stature.
I was gonna say it's my large head. It's just a large head.
You know, when a 7 5/8 is coming at you, and it's on a 5'11 3/4 frame, that can be intimidating.
Yeah, you know, but you got to use it. You got to use what you got. You know what I mean?
It's all you got. It's all you got. Like what? I can't. No thinking. Nothing. No energy spent on my part is going to make my head smaller. I'm not going to get that 1/4 inch that I'm lacking to be in the 6 foot club. Yeah. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a hand model anytime soon.
You know? It's funny, man. Like last night, I was. I went to the temple, which was great, man. I haven't done that for 8 months, right? But I went with my son for his first time, and we had some friends and some family there. And afterward, we took a photo, and my son was sort of like in front of me. I'm like, dude, like those days are gone, my friend. Like you cannot stand in front of me. So I am
conveniently find a step.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, kid is.
No, that's a rite of passage, man. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and they know it. You know, they feel it. You know, I mean, he likes to stand right next to me, shoulder to shoulder, and try to get a little bit of a downward glance at me. You know what I mean? So yeah, you know what? Enjoy it, man. Enjoy it.
Okay, so let me ask you this, right? And we're probably gonna like leave the script right out of the gate, but
yeah.
It's funny in that age, right? Because so your son is called to serve in Brazil. He's been reassigned to Fort Collins, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's doing the MTC learning experience from home. But here's the thing. Like when you're that age, those mile markers are coming at you fast.
Right.
Right? Now we get it that life doesn't necessarily follow that script, and I think tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about that, but the idea is you are going to do some things through the natural sequence of your life. You're going to come across some events. And then you get to our land.
Yeah.
Right? Where our land is now
arid.
Happening
dry. It's what? Say that again.
The events, these mile markers are happening to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. Like, I'm not gonna lie. So the other night I'm hanging out with Mrs. Freeman.
Yeah,
and she says, "Hey, has it hit you yet that your daughter just clicked submit on the missionary application?" And she's kind of getting emotional, right? Like she's getting emotional. Yeah. She's having a moment, not like end of Armageddon moment.
Yeah,
but it's right there, right?
Yeah,
it's on the surface. Like if I don't respond appropriately, this could get really, really ugly.
Did you sing "Leaving on a Jet Plane" right at that moment?
No, but of course, I did not respond appropriately because I laughed.
Yeah,
right.
That's
and
never
she
a good
looked
move.
At me, was like, "Hey, I'm having a moment here. Why are you laughing?" And my response was, "Hey, Mrs. Freeman, none of this has hit me."
That's it, man.
None of this has hit me. Not the fact that I'm 45, not the fact that it's 2020, not the fact that I lost a stepdad to cancer 11 years ago, not the fact that Taco Bell has dropped the Mexican pizza off their menu, not
Shameful.
the fact that my Seahawks are Super Bowl champions, my Cubs finally won a World Series. None of this has hit me yet. The fact that my daughters voted for a president.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's like it's hard to, and I think about this a lot because it's hard. I want to be better at enjoying the moments. I want to be better at like savoring those good things. And maybe this is just a function of feeling like I've just been blessed like crazy, because there's so much coming at you, that you're just, it's hard to step back for a second and say, man, this is what it's all about. I mean, I kind of had that moment last night with my son, but yeah, it's like it's coming fast, and it keeps coming. There's no sitting and waiting between sets for the waves, right? It's like it's one right after another.
No, that's a great analogy, and I think that that talk that you referenced in our text exchange today, leading up to the show, that's how it works, and good, better, best being on your brain, and you think about those things that are coming at you and trying to classify them, right? Some things are good, but we don't want to sacrifice the best things for good things.
Right.
And sometimes we simplify things that so that we can have like work-life balance. And I know that term is, is questionable, but like we sacrifice some things so that we can be at home just to waste time and not do essential things at home.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah. 100%. And I was talking to someone, the other day, and he said to me, man, you've done a good job with your kids. And I kind of jokingly said, well, you know what, honestly, I just sort of, my main goal is not to screw it up. Right. And just let them kind of figure it out. But I sort of feel that way, it's like, there's times when I know, like, man, there's better things I could have done there, or better time. I could have spent that time better, and it would have been more meaningful for me and for all the people in my life. But you maybe it's laziness, maybe I don't know. It's easy to justify yourself out of the best things and into the good things,
I think that path of least resistance, I mean, we're wired for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a dude, especially, we're looking at it like, yeah, I talked to my kid, right?
Yeah.
Your wife might be, hey, did you talk to your son about that thing? Oh yeah, I totally did.
Yeah.
It was like on the scale of good, better, best, how well did that conversation?
I know. Yeah.
So many times it's like, yeah, check, because I need to be able to give an account that I did.
But that's sort of been in my head a little,
right?
Yeah, it's been in my head a little bit after our conversation with Ashton, right? It's like the interviews, the formal and the informal, and I mean, I think there's a place for both of those. I think I've gone through seasons where I've been good at both of those, and I've gone through seasons where I've been bad at both of those, and maybe I've been better at the informal and not so good at the formal, and whatever.
In an effort to I shared with you that Bruce Lee quote.
Yeah.
Right. The Bruce Lee quote is basically hack away at the unessential.
Yeah. It's
not the daily increase, but daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential.
Right.
Right. And then I asked that question. If I could never tell a single person about my achievements, would I still pursue them? And I got to tell you, I loved your response, right? How would you respond to
that? I mean, look, I'd prefer not to be noticed, to be honest. I mean, look, it's funny. It's interesting because I like to be out in front. I like to do those things. I like to be, like you, kind of loud in the party, And but when it comes to the things that are meaningful, I think I'd prefer not to be noticed, and just let it happen, right?
Yeah, I got to work on that because I want the T-shirt. I want the parking space. I want the marquee, right? And I will act like almost like a counter, right? We've talked about accepting compliments before.
Yeah.
That's why I loved your response in the text exchange this morning, because it was like, sometimes I will do that too, but I need to work on the sincerity of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
A lot of times I do what I do, and I don't want the praises of men.
Yeah, right.
I want you to notice.
Yeah. And I think, well, and look, I think like when it comes to work or those kind of things, I think, you want to be noticed because there's sort of a reward attached to that to a certain degree, right? But when it comes to like just helping people or just being a friend or just, those kind of things, I'd prefer not to.
And see, that's why I love this show, right? That's what I need. That's what I'm working on. And we bring our stuff that we're working on.
Yeah.
And we show up on Thursdays and we hang out with some great folks.
Yeah.
And we say, hey, what can you teach me? So I'm going to let Lupe Cordova in.
Yeah, let's let him in the room, man.
Let's do this. We'll see what he has to say about, about some of these things as well.
Yeah.
I can guess his answer, but, we don't necessarily want to make that mistake. What's happening, Lupe Cordova? Welcome to the richest men in town. How are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you with us tonight, man. I'm looking forward to it. But as you know, we've been already doing this for a little bit, and we've been having a conversation. And I got a question for you, Lupe.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Here we go.
Pass or fail, man. This is it, man.
Here we go. If you could never tell a single person about your achievements, would you still pursue them?
Yes.
Do you do what you do for the love of it, or do you do what you do for the T-shirt?
I do what I do for the love of it because, I've been in education most of my life, and we know that the pay there isn't as lucrative as the
should be. We're working on that.
I know, but I just love it. There's multiple times in my career where I've called my wife at home and said, "Hey, I'm working today," whether it was going to a softball tournament or, just hanging out with kids or coaching a football game or whatever it was. All those things that are tied into what we do. It's just, it's just good. I sometimes I feel like, and I talked to Scott Fairley about this the other day. I said, remember about 15 years ago when I first started at West Valley, it was like we didn't even come to work. We were just, everyone was there and we were all comrading together, and it was just friends, almost like friends hanging out and still getting our job done. And it was a good environment to be in.
Yeah, I can imagine. Every once in a while, it'd be like, wait, I'm getting paid. I'm only getting paid how much for this? Right. Every other day it was like, I'm getting paid to do this. Like, this is crazy. Right. Whether you're teaching, coaching, having fun. But, we were also, before you jumped on, we were talking a little bit about kids growing up and, things coming at you fast. And there doesn't seem to be any reprieve from some of these things coming at us, especially as we have our kids going through some pretty monumental rites of passage. And Tyler's son just went to the temple for the first time. And so he's kind of processing. He's in the wake of that wave, right?
Yeah.
Just waiting for the next one. And we talked a little bit about good, better, best, and the classic general conference address by Dallin H. Oaks. Looking at the things that we have in life and the things that we do, how we spend our time, and trying to categorize that, right? Prioritize good, better, best. What does good, better, best look like in your life, Lupe?
I I think the best thing I can always be doing is spending time with my family. And I know that when about the time I was getting my master's degree, I was a little out of balance. I was probably coaching about 3 sports at West Valley and trying to do my master's degree. And I only had 1 kid at the time, but I remember one Saturday pulling out of the driveway with my 3-year-old standing in the driveway crying, like, "Don't go, Dad, don't go." And I thought, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And that's a big part of, I finished my master's degree, but I didn't go into admin for, I don't know, probably, it's been quite a few years. I mean, I sat on it for a good 8 or 10 years, just for that reason. I knew that once you're in it, you're in it. And so
Tyler, let me break this down for you, and let me tell you why I love me some Lupe Cordova.
Yeah.
So Lupe is an administrator for an alternative education high school here in Northern California, Anderson, California. And we have, from time to time, we have the opportunity to work together. And as I'm talking to Lupe, I know a little bit about his journey, but he's starting to let me in on some things kind of off the record. Right at maybe after the meeting, we're talking and he's saying some things and he's dropping these little nuggets. And this podcast has trained me to reach down and pick those nuggets up.
Right.
And so he starts dropping these little trails of nuggets. And I was like, hey, Lupe, man, I got a podcast with your name written all over it, and you can't say no to this.
Well, there you go, man.
Can't say no. So, Lupe, when I reach out to you and I got a podcast called The Richest Men in Town, and I say, hey, I need you to be a guest on this thing, what went through your mind?
I was kind of nervous. You don't know this, but one of my things is sometimes I get caught up in what I'm doing, and I leave behind a little bit. I don't appreciate what I have as much as I probably should. And so it's been kind of a good thing because it's caused me to look at what I do have. I mean, I'm a pretty fortunate guy with all the things that we have going on in our house. I don't know how, but my wife has been here for 25 years. Like, what?
Wait, 25?
25 years, yeah.
Tyler, how much you got?
24 in February, man.
Lupe wins.
Lupe wins.
Yeah.
I think you get a shirt for that, right?
Sure. Right.
Yeah. Or a mug. I can't remember which one it is, but you get something for sure.
Yeah, we'll call our merch department and make sure you get hooked up.
That's right.
We'll get those interns on it.
So let me ask you though. I mean, it's Mike and I were kind of talking about this, and maybe this goes into the good, better, best, right? Because I always feel like I find myself sort of dissecting activities that I'm involved in all the time, right? Like it's good, but then I'm always asking myself, well, was that the best thing I could have been doing, or could I made that time more meaningful, right? Yeah. And you talk about, being so busy and missing some things. What's the trick, Lupe? Teach us how we can slow things down and see the things for what they really are.
I don't know that things ever slow down,
Yeah.
Just over time, it's just been just trying to stay focused on my family, and some things don't turn out how you want them to. I for at least, I don't know, the whole time my daughter lived in our home, we adopted her when she was 3, and she would say, "Dad, I can't wait to be in your class. I can't wait to be in your class." So I always told her, I'll be there. And as she got closer, some opportunities came for me to leave. And I didn't want to leave because I knew my daughter was coming. Wow. And I thought that was the great decision to make, and
yeah,
get the school together and I can watch out for her. But by the time she got there, I was doing attendance and discipline. And so everyone just told her what a jerk her dad was all the time. It didn't work out. So for 3 years, she got to come home, or I would say, "Why are you talking to that guy?" And she'd go, "Dad, you're so judgmental." It wasn't what I envisioned it to be over the 10 years. And then so her senior year, I moved on, and it was kind of funny because she would talk to kids at the new school, and they would tell her how much they liked me. And it was just a different
right.
because I wasn't doing attendance and discipline. I always had to dish it out in that role, and so she liked it a lot better her senior year when her dad wasn't there. But yeah, I mean, you just got to always have your eye on the big picture, like what's important. There's been multiple times where I've had opportunities to leave our district to go different places, but I felt that it would draw me away from my family, and that family piece was pretty big. It's one of the reasons that I did decide to take the job that I have now, because I'm used to being at West Valley all till 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night. Mike and I were talking about that one day. Thursday night's freshman football, and they'll be home on Saturday morning when they wake up. They'll see dad again.
Seriously,
Yeah.
my daughter and my son would come and have lunch with me Wednesday because they knew they wouldn't see me till Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like that was the gig. And you talk about gratitude for our wives and the burden that sometimes we just by living with me, she didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
And she's got to carry it, right?
But here's the thing. I feel like there is like, there's people that are listening to this podcast that are probably traveling 4 days out of the week, right? They're away from their family and they're just gone. They're grinding it out, right? Similar to what you guys do, right? That we do in our jobs, but they're gone and they're away from their families. And I've been there. I've had that job where I traveled a lot, and I remember feeling guilty at times, right? Being away. But I also think that we've got to get to a point where we don't beat ourselves up, for one, right? And we recognize the good that we're doing. And we maximize the moments that we have, right? I think that's
the key.
That's
right?
the key, right?
I think that's the key. Because there's a lot of people that are at home and are gone away.
For sure.
Right? They're home, they're sitting on the couch, but they're looking at their phones, or they're in this or they're in that. So they're
Right.
in town, they're in the home, not present.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the, just thinking about some of the lessons from that good, better, best was that idea of the vacation, right?
Yeah.
They went to all these crazy places, the family vacations, and they go to, they go to theme parks and they go to all these things. And the father is hanging out with the teenage son at the end of the summer saying, hey, what was the highlight, right? And the kid says, the thing I like best this summer was the night you and I laid on the lawn and looked at the stars and talked.
Man, I got to be honest. I've never done that with my kid. Now, see, look, you're just laying the guilt fic right out of the gate, man.
But we overcomplicate it, right?
I know. Well, it's funny because
our kids just want to be with us because,
yeah.
I mean, I learned that lesson. It's been a few years ago. We went to Disney World, and it was my father-in-law and my brother-in-law and his family, me and my family. And then they had some people over from Russia. They did a foreign exchange students, and they've kept in contact, and they brought their kids over. And we all stayed at this really nice hotel. It had a water slide and a movie theater and paddle boats and all this other stuff. And we had our 5-day passes at Disney World. And when we were hanging out at the hotel and just kind of relaxing and hanging out and playing with the kids, our kids would say, Dad, why are we even going to Disney World? We have more fun at the hotel. You spend all this money to be away, and that's what we've done the last couple summers, man. My in-laws have a lake house in upstate New York, and we spend hours just barbecuing and hanging out with the family, fishing poles in the water. My father-in-law bought a ski boat this year, and it's paddle boats, just kayaks, paddle boards, all that stuff. And that's what we do. We just hang out all summer. They have go-karts at the house, and they have 14 acres, and it's just all a month of family time.
So break it down for me really quick. We'll get into it later on in the show, but give me ages of kids.
Ages, 3, 6, 11, 12, 19. I forgot the 7-year-old. 3, 6, 11, 12, and 19.
You got a 6, 7, 11, 12 combo, brother.
Yeah. 2 boys and 2 girls. Yeah.
Okay, so who is for our listeners, for ourselves, who is Lupe Cordova, man?
Who is Lupe Cordova? Well,
what's your story?
I'm just kind of a simple guy. I mean, I grew up in Quincy, in a place where I feel like had a lot to do with who I am. Just a bunch of hardworking guys up there trying to make a living, logging community. Just very simple.
What was it like growing up and siblings and family and parent influence?
So I think my dad was probably the nicest guy in town, and he was one of the hardest working guys in town. And so he kind of had a good reputation with everyone. And so as I grew up, it was always a thing where I didn't want to not meet his expectation. It's kind of, when I was in 5th grade, I actually had a little sister that passed away in her sleep. And it was like one of the biggest life-changing things that kind of ever happened to me and my family. And I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's kind of what brought us together, and it kind of changed our whole lives and who we are, and made us more family oriented. And also introduced us to 2 young men in white shirts and ties, that a family friend introduced us to. So
hold on, I gotta stop you there, because that's kind of how this program works, right?
Yeah.
We ask you a question, you say something, we say, hold up, right? Hold up.
Go off. We take a hard right turn.
That is the number one thing on my don't do that to me God list.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me that thing, A, you wouldn't change it.
I wouldn't change it.
And B, it brought you together.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you right now, something that extreme. One of the things that you asked me to think about was, what was my biggest fear. One of my biggest fears is losing a family member, huge. Like if something happened to one of my kids, I mean, I see my kids crash on a bike and I just get all tied up, like, are they hurt? And
I'm right there with you, bro. I'm right there with you.
But that's that, and I've wept with my mom talking to her about it. Like, I don't know how you went through that, and how you went through that. I had a little sister that was born premature, and she got spinal meningitis, and then it kind of like made her like a pillow angel till she was about 4, and then she died in her sleep. But they had to feed her through a tube and whatnot, and in that struggle of like going through life and doing all this other stuff, my mom wanted to know why would God allow this to happen. And so she was taking a sewing class, and the lady at the sewing class said, I have a couple young men that could probably come over and answer your questions. Mm-hmm. So they came over and they visited with the missionaries, and it's kind of a funny story, because we used to go to church, and my dad said, you ain't getting us. Like, no way, you're not getting us, or you're not getting me. These do what they want, and
maybe you might get these suckers, but you ain't getting me.
The missionaries would knock on the front door, and he'd go out the back door, right? And if I went with him, I got candy and soda. So occasionally I'd go with him. But he would always give us money to put in the tray that they pass around for money at the beginning of church. And our church doesn't do that, but we didn't tell him. We just took his money. And my mom used to say, that's what he gets for not going with us.
That's awesome.
Cash in on Dad every Sunday.
That's unbelievable.
But it was pretty cool. We all got baptized, and it wasn't, we were obviously assigned a home teacher, and he actually became my dad's best friend. But he actually went around the back door and sent the missionaries to the front door. And when they knocked and my dad was going out the back door, he said, hey, why don't you come in and listen? He did. And they became actually best friends.
Wow.
And my dad ended up being
converted. That's some sneaky stuff right there.
How old were you, Lupe, when that happened?
Well, the thing was, here, I was in like 5th grade. I was probably in 4th grade when I was baptized, and I was in 5th grade when my dad had, so probably actually third grade, because we went through the temple when I was in the fifth grade. The only reason I know that is my little sister, we went to the Oakland temple and got sealed as a family, and 3 weeks later she died in her sleep. And so like her mission was over, like I got him, you know what I mean? And so and that's why I say I would never ever trade that in for anything in the world. But also one of my biggest fears, you know, I don't know that I'm in a spot right now where I would handle that too well. That would be a tough one.
What did you learn from your mom and dad in that during that time?
Well, one of the biggest things that I learned, and my mom, she really thrived in the gospel when we first joined the church. And her answer was always, she would always say, when we had difficult questions, because we'd ask her difficult questions like, you know, why do we have to pay tithing, or why do we have to do this? And she would always say, son, here's what I can tell you, that Joseph Smith is a prophet and the Book of Mormon is true. And we've been commanded by other prophets to do this. And so we're going to do it. And how do you argue that? I mean, I wasn't in a place where I could argue that. Like, dang it, what she's saying is, I know it to be true. So, and she would always tell us, you know, don't argue about the little things. Like, you got to look at the big picture and try to figure things out. But there were a lot of times when people would say things in the church and they weren't very nice, you know. And a lot of times new members get kind of pushed away, and even members that have been members for a long time, they all get pushed away. But my mom used to always say, I'm not going to let what someone else says get in the way of my testimony. And so I think that's always been kind of a lesson for me, is to try not to let what, because we are dealing with humans no matter what, you know.
Yeah.
Let other people do and say hinder my progress in the church.
How do you honor your parents today?
Still
a commandment, right? Still a commandment.
Yeah. I just do anything that they need done. I do. You know, they're getting older. One of the probably fortunate things, probably wasn't fortunate for them, but they had me pretty young. I think my mom was 18. And I have two older sisters, and so they struggled when they were young. I know it was a struggle, but I kind of appreciate that now because they're not way older than I am. And so they're just now starting to struggle health-wise. So I haven't had to see them struggle with anything until probably this year. And so I just try to help them out, man. I got a wood splitter and a chainsaw, and I don't have a wood stove. Right? They do. And like my mom bought a new refrigerator, and her refrigerator is only 2 years old, and I needed a refrigerator. So I asked her, how much you want for your refrigerator? And she said a couple loads of oak, you know. Saying, how can I charge you? You cut all my wood and you do all this stuff for me. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's I mean, I love my parents to the end.
Well, it sounds like you had a pretty powerful experience growing up in elementary school. When did faith become a source of power and strength for you in your life? Sounds like your parents had it.
Yeah.
And we all lean on that. Where in the movie of Lupe Cordova's life is it that you kind of stand on your own 2 feet when it comes to who Jesus Christ is and his church?
Well, I lost the church for a while, you know. I made some mistakes. The peer pressure with the teenage, you know, I failed miserably. Started drinking probably when I was 14. I mean, I can remember the time. It was walking down the railroad tracks with two friends to a football game, and we had skimmed some vodka or whiskey off of his dad's counter, and we had it in a thing of orange juice, and that just kind of got the ball rolling. And so I actually fell away from the church when I was probably 16, 17 till I'm going to say I was probably in my 20. I was probably 20 before I came back. So there was a 6 years there of kind of chaos. And then then just kind of, I would say, getting moved by the Spirit that there had to be something better for me to be doing, and just kind of looking around. And so then I had a thing where I was kind of trying to change my environment. So I quit my job at Sierra Pacific. I started to go out to school, and I started to go to the Institute and hang out with Damon Streetman, was a good friend of mine. And we would,
I know Damon Streetman. Yeah.
yeah, so he kind of started mentoring me a little bit, but it was kind of a rough time because I still had all my old friends that I used to act crazy with and drink. And so there were a couple occasions in that where I was trying to right the ship, where I failed miserably and fell back to the old ways and whatnot. And
Like a foot in two worlds, right?
100%. 100%. Let's go up the Fall River and go to the fair. Let's do it. Sounds fun to me.
Know the feeling.
So I was kind of just almost like God was trying to direct me, but I didn't know if I really wanted to be directed in that direction. But then when I kind of thought that I did, I had an experience because we were all hanging out with at the Institute, and someone was going to get baptized at the Stake Center, right? And so I said, all right, I'll meet you guys at the Stake Center tonight. So me and my sister went to the Stake Center. Well, I hadn't, I mean, in the 6 years previous to that, I hadn't been in the church building all that much. And so I went to the Anderson Stake Center, not knowing that there's two stake centers. There's a Redding Stake Center and an Anderson Stake Center. And so I'm sitting in the Relief Society room with my sister, and I said, I swear they said the Stake Center. I'm like, I know that they said the Stake Center. And she's all, well, they're not here, so let's go. And I just kind of had this feeling like I needed to be there. So I said, well, let's just wait here for a little bit. And she's just like, well, what are we waiting for? And so I just kind of sitting there, and Laren Johnson was my bishop at the time. And he opened the door and he said, there you are. And I just kind of looked at him, and he said, I've been looking all over for you tonight. And I said, really? And I'm thinking, well, how do you even know I'm here? He goes, you and I need to have a talk. And I said, all right. And I just went down to the bishop's office, and we sat in there and talked for a long time. And that was kind of a life-changing moment. And he asked me, he said, what do you think about going on a mission? And I said, I think I want to go on a mission. And he said, well, you need to start meeting with me every week, and we're going to make some changes for you.
And the whole time is because you're in the wrong building.
Yes.
Lupe, that answer to the bishop of, yeah, I think I want to go on a mission. What was the thought prior to that conversation about a mission?
I always wanted to go, but I knew that I wasn't living the way I should go. And a lot of the things that I've done in my life have been on expectation. I knew my parents always wanted me to go on a mission. I knew they always wanted me to graduate from college. There were certain things that they wanted me to do and I wanted to do for them. But it got to a point after thinking about it, I just wanted to go for me to see if I could change my life. And so I talked to him that night. And one of the things he said is, I was living uptown with a friend, and he said, the first thing you need to do, and I was like 21, is move home with your parents. And I was just like, what? No. So I told my parents, and I told them that I'd met with the bishop. And so they pulled me into their bedroom to have like a heart-to-heart talk with me. And they said, listen, I appreciate that you want to go on a mission, or that you think you want to go on a mission, but don't do this for us. Like, if you don't want to go, don't do it. Don't go on a mission for me. And I just looked at them and said, I'm not doing it for you. I said, it's just something that I feel like I need to do. And so over that next year, I just kind of met with Laren Johnson every week, and he kind of mentored me, and he definitely became one of my Mount Rushmore guys. And you know, he recently passed away, and in talking to his daughter said to me at his funeral, when my dad talked about you, he talked about you like you were his own kid. And I know that. I said, I know that. And so I've always appreciated him and the impact that he had on my life. And and we always have had that connection. You know, every time he saw me at church, there, how's my boy doing? And yeah, it was just like you said, all not it wasn't. I mean, I was where I was supposed to be, and he was looking for me. So,
but there's a couple things that stand out to me in that. I mean, one is I think of guys like Laren Johnson, right? And Mike's question at the beginning, like, do you do this for the praise, or you do it because you want to do it? And a guy like Laren Johnson, right, is just doing it.
He's like doing
he sees Lupe and he's just doing it. He's just like, there he is. We're going to start something tonight.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that. And then the second thing that I love, I'm fascinated by your story right now, because to sit down in the bishop's office after however much time away, right? You'd mentioned you haven't been in the church for a long time.
Yeah.
Up to that point, just kind of hit and miss. And to sit down and have him say, what do you think about going on mission? And for you to say yes, I feel like if we rewound from that moment back however long, I think there's probably some moments where the Spirit's hitting you and saying, hey, let's change, let's do better, let's adjust, let's, right? Do you, in hindsight, do you look at that and say, hey, I was being pushed into that building by something bigger than me?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I had a good job at Sierra Pacific, and I got hurt. And then I came back after getting hurt, and someone there was hassling me, and I was just like, dude, here's what you don't understand. I don't need this job. Like, and I just quit, and the plant manager pulled me in and said, no, like, you're a very valuable person. We want you to come back. But one of the things that led me to quitting was one of my bosses there on a weekend, we were doing inventory, counting all the lumber and whatnot and tallying it up. And his name was Mike. He was a shipping boss at Sierra Pacific for a long time. And he pulled me aside and he says, can I talk to you for a minute? And I said, sure. And he said, you know, I love having you here. Like, I love having you here. You're one of the best workers I have. I said, well, thank you. And he said, but there's nothing wrong with getting an education. He said, a guy like you needs to go to school and get his education. And that was probably the first time in my life where I thought, you know what? He's right. Maybe I could do more than what I'm doing right now.
Love that.
I tried to go to college and failed miserably, but I started hanging around with kids in the institute and whatnot. And then I went on my mission, and it changed my whole, like, it just organized me. And anyway, I came back off a mission. Then I went to school, and then it was A's, and it became easy.
But we talk about hinge moments all the time, Lupe, and I think that conversation with that shift manager is a hinge moment for you, right? And it actually reminds me of the scene with Ben Affleck's talking to Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting. And he's like, you know what? Every day I come pick you up, and I'm just hoping that one of these days I'll walk up to this door and you're gone, right? And you're doing that thing that you're supposed to be doing.
We need to have Mike on the show, because here's the thing. I feel like Mike, the shipping manager. I mean, I wish that all of us were as courageous as that to look at people and recognize the good in people and recognize what people could be. And because I do this, right? I see people and I'm like, dude, that's something else. Now that's one thing, but then to pull that guy aside and say, hey, you're something else, man. Like, you can fly, and we got to get you to fly.
Yeah.
You know?
But be intentional about actually pulling that guy aside, because that's a nudge, right? I think of the people on the show, and so many of the hinge moments that people share, it's not like choir of angels coming down. It's somebody saying, hey, knucklehead, stop it. Right?
Yeah.
Turn it around. Adjust your course a little bit, brother. You're off.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the power of tiny hinge moments.
Yeah.
Of small things. And then how important it is for us, like Tyler, you're saying, to actually go out there and say it. Right? Like the other day, we had missionaries in our home, We have this guy. We're his first area. He's been here for a couple weeks. Noticeable growth from the first time he was here till now. And so as he's sharing that message, we feel the Holy Ghost testify that what he's telling me is true. And I just say to him, Elder Allred, man, can I just say, I don't want to offend you, but you have grown so much. That took literally 10 seconds of my time.
Yeah.
You know what it did for that, Elder?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Well,
and
and
walking away.
The hope is that, like, Lupe, right? Like, you have that experience with Mike, the shipping manager, and that you continue that in your own life, right? I feel. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
That drives me at work, and even when I was a teacher, and I would look around and I would see someone in a position that I felt like they were underachieving. I'd pull them aside and have that conversation, like why are you doing this? I mean, I know that you're in this position, but you can get your degree and get paid for what you do, man. I mean, let's do something different, and that a lot of that has to do with just, Mike pulling me aside. Yeah. I went back probably just a couple years ago and sat down with Mike in his office and just talked to him about that moment in life and said, I know I've said thank you before, but I just want to thank you again. I'm in a pretty good place, and a lot of it had to do with that little nudge you gave me when I was probably not in a good place.
All right. So look, these are the principles. Like, I love this. Like, I feel like this is what life should be about, right? Honestly, I feel like you push people in the right direction because you've been pushed in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then you go back, and we talked with Ashton Buswell about honoring people, right? You go back and you tell people why you're grateful for them. Like, there's those two things will push someone's trajectory like so far, right? If we say, hey, I believe in you and you can accomplish greater things, boom, right? Now we've got someone that can soar. And then we go back to that person and we say, or the person that pushed us, and we say, hey, remember when you told me this? Changed my life. Like, and we can see it in their face, like, man, there's some pride there. There's some, I did something there. And I think it's important that we recognize that in people. I love that.
Well, and I think it goes to that borrowed confidence, right? Like, I'm sure we're in these situations where we get nudged and it's not working out. And we're looking at ourselves in the mirror like, I can't do this. And who's in our head?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That person that nudged us, that believed in us, is like, well, wait a minute. What did they see? Right?
Yeah.
They must have saw something. So maybe I'll give it another shot. Maybe I'll give it another go.
And that whole idea that confidence builds on confidence, right? Like, when you accomplish something, and then you pay that same compliment to someone else, and you can see that growing them, you grow at the same time. I mean, it's just this whole, like,
when it's
synergistic model of,
it's minimum work for maximum output.
It's minimum work that doesn't get done often enough. And that's the thing. Like, I think that a lot of times, I'm guilty of this. I see things and I think it, but I don't do it. Right. I think, and that kid right there, I mean, think about that. I mean, think the times that someone said to you, hey, this is what you've done for me. And you think, geez, Louise, like, I was just there doing my thing. And thank goodness this person, it's good to be recognized, but it's good to be in the right spot to help someone out,
Yeah. Hey, I don't want to get on the propaganda thing. And I know Lupe's got some things to teach, but as a baseball fan, as a Cubs fan, right?
We're talking about Dodgers this year, I thought, man.
No. Theo Epstein had a thing. This was the Cubs' way of doing business.
Theo Epstein.
If you and I have a conversation about somebody, get that guy in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm talking to you about how great that person is, get that guy in the room.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to you and I'm coming in and I'm venting about how that person needs to improve, get that guy in the room.
I mean, it's huge, right? That's a big deal. And I think in the smallest things, we have to be better about that. I mean, look, Sierra Pacific, doing inventory on a Saturday and telling someone that, hey man, you could do greater things and, you know, get your education. I just think that's a powerful thing, man.
That's powerful.
Mike's a
great
guy.
story.
I want to meet Mike. All right. That's awesome, man. I love it.
So you work with a good bishop. You're in the wrong building at the right time.
At the right time.
Bishop finds you. You start working with them. I'm curious though, when Bishop starts asking you to do these hard things, like move back home.
Yeah.
How do you get to that, right? Because I can tell you right now, every time God has asked me to do something, usually through another person, it's never convenient. It's never easy. It's never logical to like my way of thinking or seeing the world around me. How do you process that, and how do you take that step?
That was probably one of the hardest things I did. I mean, I've always been pretty independent. You know, when I was 16, I moved back to Quincy to graduate with my friends because it was my senior year. I turned 17 my senior year, and then when I graduated, I rented an apartment up there. So, I mean, I was on my own at 17, and then when the bishop said you have to move home, so I would say now I'm 21. I'm just like, I'm going out with, even though it was Damon, you know, I'm going out with Damon tonight. Okay, be home at 11. 11? 21 years old. What do you mean be home at 11? And my dad simply said, hey, I don't care how old you are. You're living under my roof, and I'm not going to stay up all night and wonder where you are. I got to work in the morning, so be home at 11.
I love that, man.
Just dropping curfews on me at 21. And then, you know, it wasn't easy because I was used to doing what I wanted, when I wanted, and all that. And there were a few times where I told my mom, look, I'm only here because the bishop told me to be here, you know, and that wasn't true, but it's just something I kind of threw back on her. But I mean, in hindsight, there's no way I would have made it if I would have stayed with uptown, with living with, you know, different people. It's just too much temptation to step back in the old ways. Even as it was, you know, I fell a couple times. You know, I went up to the lake and stayed on a houseboat with a bunch of friends. I thought I could hang, you know, because I hadn't maybe drank for about 6 months and just fell off the, you know, the wagon. And then it's one of those things where you feel defeated, like Satan won, like it's over. I can't do this. I messed it up, you know. You just got to go in with your head down and start over, man. That's one of the things that I learned during that time period is that, I mean, God loves you where you're at, man. He's not waiting for you to perfect yourself before he loves you. He loves you where you're at. And you know, Laren loved Lupe where he was at. He didn't love him because he was perfect or because he was ready to go on a mission. He loved him where he was at. So, and that's my parents have always been that way. It's unconditional love. You know, I would do certain things, but I would never do things around them just out of the respect I had for them. And they didn't browbeat me. They've always unconditional love no matter what. If I were out drinking or something and I was hungover, I could come and lay on the floor and in front of the fireplace and watch TV, and my mom would just feed me, you know, and kind of get me out of my funk. But people like that can learn to love people where they're at. They do a lot of moving of people.
Yeah.
Lupe, I mean, I'm hearing my song in your words, right? I'm hearing my story, and I can appreciate so much your journey and where you're coming from right now, looking at where you are in your life and the Goliaths that you've slayed. How does that make you feel about the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ?
It just kind of gives me hope. Like he's there, man. He's there for us, and that he's going to be there regardless of who we are and what we're doing. It just, yeah. I mean, I've leaned on him a lot. I've leaned on him a lot and been moved. There's been a lot of, probably 4 major times when I've been moved, and I did decide that night to go on a mission, but I didn't really like good idea. I think I'll do it. But there was times where I struggled. And I remember one time I was driving around and just driving that's what I do when I'm in deep thought. I like to drive around, windows down, music playing loud, people at stop signs looking at me like I'm a weirdo. But
what's playing?
80s rock, probably, maybe some REO Speedwagon. And that was one of those times where I felt the Spirit very strong say, go on a mission. And I've always been grateful for that, to be able to hear that voice in those important times when you're making those big decisions. So I know that he's not going to leave me to be by myself. He's there as long as that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I like that pattern. Like, I'm just thinking about, the idea of obedience, and sort of the training grounds of obedience. You've got Laren Johnson, who says, go move back in with mom and dad, right? It's sort of like this test, right? Like, are we willing to make the sacrifices that we need to get where we want to be? And the beautiful thing about that is it doesn't have to be an immediate acceptance, right? We can go in there and say, why, I don't know why in the world I'm doing this. And then eventually we go, oh, that's why I'm doing it. And I think even that moment, listening to REO Speedwagon with the windows down and the music loud, and you having that impression, I think that's another teaching moment of obedience, right? Because there's been lots of times where I've pushed those feelings away. Like, yeah, I know that there's an impression there, but I'm pushing it to the side because maybe I don't want to do it. But when I finally get around to doing it, the ability for me to kind of accept, kind of set my own things aside and say, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it is to do the right thing or better myself.
Because I think that is what the war in heaven was fought over, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't compel us to do anything. That prompt, we can heed it. We can push it under. It'll pop back up. We push it under. It pops back up, right? But he respects that agency, and then we see and we come around. As long as there's an ember, as long as there's an ember that he can work with, and somewhere in there, right? Somewhere on that train track, starting with that first drink, through all of those things that Lupe's been through, there's always been that ember of faith.
Yeah.
And
somewhere.
I think too that we can recognize that the path is not the same for everybody, right? And I think one of the things that I've noticed with some of the youth that I've had the pleasure to work with, right, is that there's this expectation of what I have to look like and how that path has to be marched down.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case, right? And if I step off of that path, all bets are off. It's over. There's no reaching those goals. And I think it's important to understand that, hey, we're not saying you should walk down the railroad tracks with your buddy's dad's whiskey right at 14, but we are saying that if that does happen, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important.
I think we're saying that God has a plan built around those things happening.
Yeah, right.
And here's
everything.
The things that we're talking about, there are physical things that are easy to see. So many people struggle with things that aren't. It's easy to see someone down at the bar on a Friday night, but you don't know what's going through their phone, or you don't know what's doing this, that, and the other. And so again, that's that people are going to fail. They fail constantly. I mean, and I've tried to, with my kids, let them know that it's okay to fail, and also share with them some of my stories so that they can learn from me. I mean, the greatest thing that we can do is learn from each other's failures. I mean, that's the biggest motivator for why you do or don't do something. It's because you see where it leads. I mean, I'm constantly having conversations at school like, you know where this road ends.
Oh, that's so
Right.
perfect. Where will this lead?
Yeah.
Hey, while you're on that subject about talking to our kids and pointing those things out, I want to share this with you. And this is, again, from that Good, Better, Best. President Gordon B. Hinckley says that we should work at our responsibilities as parents as if everything in life counted on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in fact, everything in life does count on it. And then he continues and actually specifically calls us out as men. I ask you men, particularly, to pause and take stock of yourselves as husbands and fathers and heads of households. Pray for guidance, for help, for direction, and then follow the whisperings of the Spirit to guide you in the most serious of all responsibilities. For the consequences of your leadership will be eternal and everlasting in the home. That's like the mission statement of this podcast, Tyler Gould.
Yeah, it's funny as you're saying that, because I'm just thinking, like, you know, he's like, what is it? Do it like everything counts on everything that you're doing with your kids. And I'm thinking, holy cow, I got some work. Hopefully it's not too late, man.
Repent.
Did you like have family home meeting this week?
Yeah, but I mean, it is interesting though. I was, you know, you do have that thought, like, and I think, you know, look, for me personally, you know, I've got 4 kids, and I think about them all the time, right? All the time. And I'm constantly thinking, like, all right, is this, what am I going to do to help this situation or this person, or what can I do to let them know that I love them? Like, that's always in my head, right? Like, and then the other question is, you know, and I think it's easy to beat ourselves up. Like, how bad am I screwing this one up? You know, like, am I really, is it too late to bring it back around?
You know what I found myself asking, where's the line between influencing and molding?
Oh yeah.
Right. I want to influence them. I don't want to create a couple of mini me's.
Yeah.
You know, I want them to be their own self, and I want them to have their own experiences. I want them to come not to their truth. I want them to come to and gain a testimony of the truth. I just don't necessarily want my fingerprints all over it.
Yep.
Right.
Right. It's the guide rails, right? I mean,
yeah.
The other day I was
sitting
in a soccer
analysis.
meeting, right? And I was sitting next to my daughter, who's on a soccer team, competitive soccer team, and they have 21 players on the team, but every game they can only dress 18, right? So three kids have to not participate every week. And
that's fun.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's a brutal, and especially for 16-year-old girls, right? It's brutal. So she was sitting next to me in the sacrament meeting, and I could tell she was upset, you know. And I said, "What's going on?" And she starts kind of telling me, whispering to me what's happening. And I just said, "Look, you know what? Right now, you think this is the most important thing, right? This soccer thing, and I get it. It's important. But I said the irony is where we're at is the most important thing that we'll ever be involved in." Right. So let's shift our perspective a little bit, right? And try to step out of that pain that is, I might not dress for a soccer game, to what am I really trying to accomplish in life? Right. And hopefully I'm with you, Mike. I don't want to say, hey, zip it. I don't want to hear it because this is the most important. I want to say, this is the most important, and I want you to figure that out. Right.
Well, it's like, but Lupe, we work with teachers, right? The idea is, there are some teachers that teach kids, learn it, memorize it, recite it for the test, move on. And there are some teachers that help kids actually discover it.
Yeah.
So that it's theirs.
Yeah.
So that the kid walks out and he owns that. She owns that. That's how I want the gospel of Jesus Christ to be in my kids' hearts. I don't want them reciting dad.
So Lupe, you have 5. We reinserted the 7-year-old back into the mix since you forgot him.
Wait, how many do we got?
Six.
Six. All right, you got 6. Yeah. What does that look like? What does faith look like in a family of 6? And how do you mold and help them discover, as Mike talks about?
A lot of patience. Patience. Well, it's kind of interesting, when I adopted, we're talking about those impressions when kind of God speaks to your heart. When I adopted my 3-year-old, one of the impressions I got, and I shared it with my wife, was, if you don't raise her in the gospel, it won't matter that you adopted her. Mm-hmm. And so I've always kind of held to that, like that is, we don't do the Sunday things. We like you said, we have to be in church on Sunday, taking the sacrament. That's the most important thing that we can do. And so I've had to make decisions to be the example of that. So coaching football for 15 years, never coaching at the varsity level. Why don't you go coach with the varsity? Because they do film on Sunday. Like I can't do film on Sunday. I have to be at church. Just those decisions. I've coached a few teams where I've had to say, I'll do whatever you want me to on Monday through Saturday, but on Sunday, I'm going to go to church and eat dinner at my parents' house. That's just a Sunday thing for us. And so just kind of making it important, letting my daughter and the rest of her siblings know how important it is. My daughter woke up and went to seminary for 4 years with very little, like, nudging, get up. I don't remember ever waking her up. She always just got up and went. And so I've always appreciated that from her. But it's just, when you make it a priority, your kids make it a priority. When you sit in sacrament next to your daughter and tell her, hey, this is the most important place that we can be right now. There's this, you don't have to do much more teaching than that.
Right. Yeah. You just live it. Right. And that's, and they see that. So let's back up for a second, because we're getting into your kids and I want to talk about your kids, but I want to talk about your wife for a minute. And can you tell us how you guys met and give us that story? And we'll talk to her later to get the facts, but you just tell us what's going on.
Yeah. So I was working construction. I used to do asbestos abatement down in the Bay Area, and I had met a friend down in the Bay Area, and he said, we had dated a ton of girls. I'm home from my mission. I'm probably about 25. I'm ready to get married, just dating whoever I can, whatever. And so finally I said, let's move out to Salt Lake City. And we came up with an idea, like, let's get jobs out in Salt Lake. We're going to move out there. So I called out on a Monday night. I called on this job doing what we were doing in the Bay Area. And he said, did you hear anything? Because we got back together at the hotel. Did you hear anything? I said, I have good news and I have bad news. He's like, what's that? So the good news is we got jobs. He goes, well, what's the bad news? And I said, we start on Thursday. And so we had to quit our jobs, pack our stuff, and drive out to Utah. But I remember we did the Iron Science building, all the demo for it when they remodeled it. And so we were staying in those apartments. And this kid came to me and said, hey, are you going to go to family home evening with us tonight? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he came back and he said, how was it? And then I asked him how it was. And he said, there was 14 girls and 2 guys. And I said, I will be with you next week. So we went to family home meeting, and my wife was in that group. And so she lived right on our block. And so I was running the job, the demo job at the Iron Science building. And I used to have to come out of containment and do all these samples and stuff. And I told her one time, I saw you today on campus. And she goes, no, you didn't. There's too many kids. I said, I absolutely did. And so I called her out one time, and I came out of the containment and I said, hey, come over here. And so we talked, and she goes, you did notice me, didn't you? But it was funny, before that, my roommate brought her over because they were hanging out a little bit, and she saw me off work and she said, hey, does your roommate speak Spanish or speak any English? So that's the first time we met. And then we just kind of start dating and through that family home evening, and then just, I don't know, it just kind of went from there. Our first date was a service project. This is so BYU date. Service project in the morning, and then we went and had lunch, and then we went to a BYU football game, and then we left that, went to dinner, and then went to a George Strait Faith Hill concert. And just like an all-day event, like, yeah, and that was our first date. And then
That's like one of those dream dates that they have on Bachelor.
and so
Were there
anyway,
fireworks at the end, like, you know, just for you?
yeah. So and then we just kind of dated for a while, and I would say that, yeah, I pursued her more than she pursued me, but I would never tell her that.
No one's going to hear this podcast anyway. So we're
So, hey, 25 years of marriage. What do you love about her?
She's she's like the most kind, innocent person you will ever meet in your entire life. And she's just so giving. She's like, she gets it from her dad and her mom. They're very giving people. You know, I tell them all the time, I admire what you guys do. I mean, you guys live pretty well, what I would call frugally compared to how they could live, but yet they help so many people. And they're constantly helping people, whether it's financial or just going and helping them. It's just kind of amazing. And that's how my wife is. She's naive a little bit to things that go on around her. Some kids thought it would be funny one night I don't know if I should be saying this on this podcast.
Looking at it.
yeah.
Smoke some marijuana on my front porch in the middle of the night. So I came out on a Saturday morning, and there was this big old marijuana bong sitting on my brick thing. And so I brought my wife out, and I said, "Hey, look what somebody left us." And she said, "What is it, a fish tank?" And I said, "I do, it's a fish tank. I'll throw it away." And I threw it in the garbage. It's just, but I appreciate that about her. I mean, she's a little naive. She's just one of the most kind people we ever meet in the world. And hey, she puts up with me all day, every day. And so, yeah, she is, and she loves the Lord. I mean, yeah.
That's awesome.
What would you, so as a seasoned veteran married person, what advice would you give to somebody getting married today?
You don't have to be right. You don't have to be right. I remember the early days when it was always who was right, you know?
Yeah.
You don't have to be right. And you got to be willing to give. I mean, especially in a house of 8 people. I mean, how often do you get your way?
Yeah, the odds are slimmer then, right?
There's a great quote from Lynn Grant Robbins that says, "You can be right or you can be married. You can't be both."
Hey, and if you can, and this is like sound advice, if you can do everything you can to make sure your wife is happy, then you're going to be happy. And what I mean is, if you came home and she's frazzled and she just has had a rough day or a rough week, call her friend and say, "Hey, can you come over and scoop my wife up and go get an ice cream or something? I'll even pay for it." And just get them out of the house and let them have their alone time. It just makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, that's great
advice.
advice.
I was asked to officiate a wedding a couple months ago, and I came across an old thing that I had actually kept in my journal from back when I joined the church. And the advice was that as you fill her life with love, everything that overflows comes your way.
100%.
Right? And if you think about that, if you're just making sure that her life is filled with love, because you will be the beneficiary of the overflow.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I am not perfect in that in any way, shape, or form. But as I have tried to make her my priority, as I've tried to nurture that, it's true.
Yeah.
Comes your way.
So Lupe, you're married 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, your oldest is 19, right?
Yeah.
19 years old. You've got 6 kids. Can we talk about kids and the journey of building a family?
Yeah, like I said, we were married for 8 years, tried to have kids, didn't have kids. It was kind of a pretty frustrating process for us. We've talked about this a little bit before. The frustrating part is like when you get married and you're in the church, you're expected to just have a family. And when you don't have a family, you don't fit the mold. And so sometimes when you show up at church, everyone wants to know, how come you don't have kids? And sometimes I wanted to say, that's a good question. Like, can you find out for me? So they want to give all the advice in the world. It's a righteous desire. If you were righteous, you could pray for a kid and you would have one. Like that simple,
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, come on, Lupe, you're not praying hard enough, right?
that's how I felt for a lot of years. I was just like, maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm not doing things right. Maybe there is something wrong. And so for 8 years we tried to have a kid, and then about 8 years in, I don't want to say this too loud, but I think my wife was going to turn 30. And I don't want you to do the math and figure out how old she is. She'll be mad at me. But about 8 years in, we decided that we were going to be specific in our prayers. And so we fasted and prayed that we could have a baby before she turned 30. And so we started the year out, and, everyone, family members are fasting and praying. And so we get through the summer, and I kind of started to get discouraged. I used to teach sex ed at West Valley High School. So I understood 9 months we're only 3 months out. It's not going to happen. And so I kind of started getting real discouraged and whatnot. And so about that time, my friend's wife called me, one of my best friends in Salt Lake. And he said, hey, we got this little girl we want you to meet. And so no CPS or anything. We just concocted this thing where we said, hey, here's what's going to happen. We're going to go out there. We're going to bring her to California for a month. She'll stay in Tahoe. She'll come visit you for a weekend. Then you'll bring her back. And then she'll come visit you again for a weekend. And then you can make a decision on whether or not you want to adopt her. And we were pretty naive, thinking that it was that simple. And so that night, or we were going to go after the Sutter game and just drive out and get her on the weekend, me and my wife and him and his wife. And then we were going to bring her back and just be at work on Monday. It was just going to be all night driving, pick her up, bring her back. So his wife got sick, and then my wife got sick. So we decided we weren't going to go. We'd go in a couple of weeks. And then he said, I'm going to go anyway. I'm just going to take my 18-year-old daughter with me and we'll bring her back. So we did that. And he got back on like a Monday or Tuesday. And so on Wednesday, I said, hey, it's digital cameras just came out. And I said, hey, can you send me a picture of her? And, we were just kind of talking and whatnot. And he said, yeah, I'll have my wife do that. So I came home from football practice on Wednesday night, and he had emailed me a picture. Okay. And so I'm sitting at my computer and I see this picture right here.
Oh man.
And so
beautiful.
I just get, that's one of those impressions I'm telling you about, that she's yours. Like, she's not going home. She's yours. And so I tell my wife, I stayed up all night. I couldn't even sleep. And so Thursday morning, I tell my wife in the morning, when I go pick her up, she's going to come home with us and stay. So I showed up. That was when Grandel and I were working out every day. And he's like, dude, you look like crap. What's going on? And I said, well, I stayed up all night because I'm going to go pick this little girl up tonight in Tahoe, and she's going to come home with us, and I'm going to adopt her, and she's going to be ours. And he's just like, wow. So we went to LP. We played the game. I drove my truck to Oroville, got in my truck, and drove towards where they lived up off Donner Summit. And so I'm driving up there. The whole time I'm on the cell phone with my wife. I'm like, what if she doesn't like me? Like, what if she cries all the way home and doesn't want to come home with me? And we're just all these scenarios. And of course, my wife's all, well, what are we going to do about work? And I'm like, well, I took tomorrow off, so we're good there. And so I'm driving up. Well, he lives, no exaggeration, like 4 to 6 miles down this dirt road off of Donner Summer. So I said, well, I'm going to lose you. I got to go. And so I drive up, and about 10 o'clock at night, I pull up to their house, and I get out, and I walk up to the kitchen, and his wife is in there sweeping the floor. So I knock on the door, and she lets me in. I give her a hug, and she says, are you ready to meet Crystal? I said, yeah, I'm ready to meet Crystal. And she said, well, let's go. She's in the living room. So I walk in the living room. There's this little 3-year-old girl laying on the couch watching TV. And Liz says to her, Crystal, you ready to meet Lupe? Remember I said you were going to go stay the weekend with Lupe and Kim? And she stands up, and she looks at me, and she just throws her arms around me and bear hugs me and says, you're my new daddy. And she just held me. And so my friend's wife just started to cry. He said, Lupe, I've never told her anything like that. And so then I started to cry, of course, and I held her she just held me for like 5 minutes. And so I put her down on the ground, and she started picking up all of her stuff. She's all, come on, Dad, we're going to my new house. Let's go. Come on, Dad. And so she had one suitcase and a doll named Free and a car seat. That's all she had. And she just kept saying, let's go. Come on, Dad. We're going to go to my new house. Let's go. And so I visited with my friends for a while.
What is that?
Huh?
That is crazy. That's one of the best stories I've ever heard, man.
And she is and Dad from day one. I told her, I said it took you maybe 30 seconds to wrap me around your finger. Like it was a done deal. And she fell asleep in the car. We drove home. I carried her in the house and put her to sleep on the couch. I laid on the floor in front of the couch. She woke up the next day, and I called my friend to let her know. And you know how kids are. I mean, we didn't have cell phone capability back then. It was just a flip phone. She's carrying the phone around. Look, my new house has a kitten and all this other stuff. And so she just stayed. She didn't go back, and she was ours ever since. And about a year later, there was a lawyer up in Reading who also was a member of the church, and I used to run around with this kid a little bit. And he said, I don't do adoptions, but I'll do your adoption for you. And so he contacted Utah and basically told the CPS workers out there, listen, we got a young couple out here. They've had this kid in their home for over a year. You can either sign the rights over to them, and it's going to cost them a little bit of money, or you can fight it and it's going to cost them a lot of money. But either way, the result's going to be the same because she's been living with them for a year. And they just signed it over. And so, we adopted Crystal. And then we had her for 8 years. She was spoiled. She had every princess outfit there was. We immediately took her to Disney World, and then the other grandkids decided that they didn't go to Disney World, so we had to go back with all of them. And everyone that would come over would bring her a princess dress because they knew that she liked them. She watched whatever she wanted on TV and all this other stuff. So after about 8 years of just spoiling her, she would wear these dresses to West Valley at basketball games. She would do the drawings. She was like the little princess of West Valley. They'd call her out mid-court and all this other stuff. I said, she's going to get about 3 divorces if we keep this up. We need to get a sibling so that she has to compromise. She doesn't know what compromise is. Watches what she wants on TV. We go eat where she wants to eat. I mean, it's not real life. So I told my wife, let's adopt one more. And it's got to be a girl because we'll have all this girl stuff. So she calls me up one day and says, hey, there's 2 boys that are ready to be adopted. What do you think? And I said, a girl and one. And you're talking about 2 boys? She goes, well, let's just go visit them. Maybe we could pick one. And I'm just like, this is a trap. So we go to Anderson River Park, and we're at the playground. There's a 1.5 and a 2.5-year-old boy. And they were just as cute as pie, And so I said to my wife, how do you pick? Like, how can you just pick one? So we decided to pick them both. And you talk about crazy. These kids had energy. They flipped our house upside down. Like my daughter was crying. Why did we adopt these kids? There were a couple nights where I was sitting in the window up in the house and I was crying like, why do we adopt these kids? They don't sleep. They get up at 5 every morning and wake everyone else up, and they don't sit in church. I told my wife, let's just quit church for 6 years. And then when they're like 8, 9, we'll go back because this isn't working. They don't sit. It's just, you go to church and it's just like, and it took about a year for them to settle down. And I mean, they were displaced. They didn't know. My son was born into foster care out of the hospital, and his foster dad held him every night for the first year and a half of his life. And then all of a sudden that guy's gone. And it was pretty chaotic for a while. We've kept a relationship with them. Like I didn't want them to disappear out of their lives. So they're like grandma and grandpa, and they still come over for Christmas and Easter and birthdays. Wow. and all that stuff. And he actually brought me a gun one time and said, I want you to have this because I want you to hunt. And I want to hunt with those boys. And I know the only way I'll do that is if you hunt. And so we go hunt with them from time to time and whatnot. So then we have 3 kids and life's good. About, a year goes by and we're just getting settled in, and we're on the no-call list for CPS. We're not doing it. And they call us and they say, hey, we got a baby, only 2 weeks old. Mom's nowhere to be found. It's kind of like a done deal. If you want to adopt her, I'm just throwing that out there. And this is what happened. This is kind of what happens when you know people personally at CPS. They kind of like, hey, what do you think? And it was a hard no for me because that was a rough year with the boys. And so it was a hard no for me. And so my wife, being my wife, said, hey, I've never had a baby in my home. And as a woman, it's the one thing that I've always wanted is to have a baby. And we've never experienced that. And if we say no to this baby, I feel like we're saying no forever. And so I went to school and I told that story to Greg Grandel, and he goes, give me your phone. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm calling your wife to congratulate her on the new baby. How do you say no to that? And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so we are again going to New York for a month. And so we met with the social worker, and they said the receiving home would keep her till we got back. And so we left for a month and we came back, and then we got Emily into our home, and we were done. But we lived in a 1,500 square foot house. We only had 3 bedrooms. And so I told my wife we need to buy a bigger house or do an addition. And so we looked around and we thought it'd be feasible because I could do a lot of the work to do the addition. So I told my wife, I'll do the addition under one condition: no more kids. Like, we're doing this addition for the kids we have. We're not creating space for more kids. And she said, well, let's talk about that. And she said, God has spoke to my heart, and I don't feel like we're done with kids yet. And I was just like, oh, I said, I can't do anymore. And she said, that's between you and God. So I've already talked to God and let him know that he needs to soften your heart, because I'm not going to bring kids in here if you don't want them. And so that's between you and God. And so I'm just like, all right, I'm fine with that. And so we, one day I was at softball practice. I'm on my way home, and my wife calls me, and she's bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, well, what's wrong? And she goes, I did something today, and I think you're going to be really mad. I'm like, what'd you buy? And she goes, I brought home a baby. And I'm thinking, you did what? Like, you bring home puppies, you don't bring home babies. And I said, and I was pretty mad. And I said, I'm going to hang up right now. I said, I'll talk to you when I get home. Just let me think things over a little bit. I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. So I go home, and there's this 10-month-old baby, has like a blue helmet on her head, and the most beautiful blue eyes you've ever seen. And I told my wife, I said, we're going to New York in a couple months. This is your problem, not mine. I'm not holding her. I'm not changing her diaper. I'm not doing anything. You said yes. This is you. And of course, she loved me. And so she just would migrate to me and sit on my lap and all this other stuff. So we had her for 50 days and not 30. And I fell in love with her. I mean, like, I taught her to walk. She was very like emotionless when we got her. I taught her to laugh. I taught her to talk a little bit just in those 50 short days. And then off we went to New York, and she got put in a foster home. And so we went and did our thing in New York. And as soon as we came back, I said, I have to go check on Leah and see how she's doing. So I called the foster parent who, we exchanged numbers and we were good friends with. And I'm like, hey, can we have her this Sunday? Sunday's like a family day for us. And so we want to have her over. And so she said, sure. And so I drive up and I knock on the door, and here comes Leah. And she sees me, and she just bolts to me, grabs me, holds me, pretty similar to what Crystal did. And she just, it was that, where in the hell have you been look? Like, you let me down. Like, where have you been? And she just held me. And so we would come and we would pick her up every Sunday night. And then it was like a Saturday, Sunday. And then the foster mom had 2 babies that age, and one of them got sick. She didn't know what she was going to do. I said, well, just bring us Leah and we'll keep her until the other one's not sick. And, then it became a Friday to Sunday thing. And so finally we just called CPS and said, can you just place her back in our home? And so we had her in our home for like a year, and CPS called, and we were just finishing up the addition. And they said the mom had another baby and they want to keep the babies together. So could we have both of them, or they're going to try and place them somewhere else? And if they didn't get placed, then we could keep Leah. And I was to the point where I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, if you take her out of my home, I got to move to Mexico or something. And so we brought the baby on. We finished our addition and we brought the baby on. And my wife's just like, what are you doing? Like, no, we can't have the baby and Leah. Like, that's too much and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And of course, the baby, Leah, is daddy's baby. The baby is mama's baby. And it just kind of, and all of it though is like, and people always say, why do you have 6 kids? Why do you have 6 kids? And I just tell them, man, when God tells you something to do something, whether or not it makes sense, you have to do it, right? And so when he's telling you that these kids need to be with you, it's like they're with you. When he's telling you need to move home with your parents and leave that life that you're living and go on a mission, as hard as it may be, that's what you need to do. And it's not always easy having 6 kids. It's I will tell you, it's a lot.
I don't think it's not always easy. I don't think it would ever be easy. Have you had a moment ever where 6 kids was like, that was easy?
Yeah. No. Yes, I take that back. At about 9 o'clock at night, it gets pretty easy. 9 to about 5:30, it's pretty easy.
Well, enjoy that, because 9 becomes 9:15, can become 9:30, becomes, hey, I've got a science project, becomes, right?
Yeah, for sure. So now it's okay. Kids go to bed at 9, and I usually waiting up till 10:30, 10:45 for my 19-year-old to get off work and come home. So.
It just the clock keeps ticking, man.
Yeah.
What does having 6 kids teach you about your capacity to love?
Here's what I always tell my kids is and my daughter struggled because she went from queen bee to 2 and then another baby, and she kind of struggled throughout this, like, why can't we go back to just me? Like, 8 years is a long time of just me.
Yeah.
And I always tell her, I said, listen, the more you love, and this is kind of what you were saying about your wife earlier, Mike, the more you love, the more you're loved. And so, I mean, there's enough love to go around. If you just spread love to all your siblings, they're going to give it back to you. And so that part of it makes it easy. Those moments when my 11-year-old, he's the one with the temper, when he flies off the handle and you just kind of turn the other way, like, okay, you do you for a little bit. And then he comes up and says, Dad, I love you. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. Without you prompting him to do it. Those moments are kind of what keeps you going.
And Lupe, what would you tell someone who finds themselves in your shoes, sitting in the chapel on a Sunday with their wife and not having the kids next to them and wondering, why not? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest first instantly so I went from being bitter at God to meeting Crystal like instantly and going, okay, I get it now. Like, you had a different plan for me. And that's what I would say to them. And the hardest part is when you're in it. That 8 years when I couldn't have kids, it was hard to say, you know what, God has a plan for me. And then when it was solved, it was instantly, okay, I get it now. And my life has been like that. I've learned that lesson in all of it, is that God has a different plan for everybody. And that if you'll focus on him and not what everyone else is saying around you, then he'll guide you where you need to be. And that's easy to say and not easy to do. I'll tell you that. I mean, I lost a position. I was encouraged to get my admin credential. I was given a position at my work, and then someone was getting laid off, a teacher that wasn't even tenured. So they gave them that position to keep them on board. Well, I didn't think that was right, and I got real bitter. So I quit coaching and everything for a couple of years. And during that time is when I adopted my boys. And I always think back, like, if I hadn't have lost that position, I probably would have been focused on my career, and I wouldn't have adopted the boys. And then I wouldn't have adopted Emily, and I wouldn't have adopted the other two. So it is difficult. It's difficult to not, but not everybody fits the mold. And like, I've said it before, that's one of the most difficult things about being in our church is we want to see everyone as they fit in the mold of sitting in the pew and everyone acting all good on Sunday. And in our minds, they go home and sit at the dinner table like that. And, the kids come in and they use their manners. And
the Waltons.
Right? Thank you. Yeah, the Waltons. And that's not what it is. I mean, just gotta kind of focus on the Lord. So, and I've had some things happen to me, recently, and had conversations with friends that said, and I told them, I said, listen, this is the one thing that I've learned. These decisions that go on around me, that's not what's in control of me and my destiny. It's God that's in control of that. And so rather than be angry, I'm just going to kind of pop my head up and say, okay, what direction are you trying to push me in? Like, is there something out there that you're trying to make me aware of that I'm not aware of right now? And there's so many, whereas in the past I would just get mad and just be mad forever and stay mad for 3 years about something that happened at work, and that's silly.
Well, I think that those 8 years, the challenge with those 8 years is your desire is a righteous desire.
100%.
And the righteous desire turns into a trial of faith, almost like a faith crisis, right? Where we're starting to feel bitterness and we're starting to feel like, we talk about that ember of faith, and bitterness can squash that real quick.
Yeah.
And pretty soon the thing that you want, the thing that you're praying for, the thing that you're fasting for, the thing that everybody's judging you for not having, turns into the thing that could drive a wedge between you and God.
Yeah.
I think it's too. I think when you're telling this journey, And I just think about like being pliable, you know, I mean, to be willing to change. And it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day, you know, I was thinking about my kids, right, where they're at. I mean, we can all think about our kids right now in the situation that they're in now, right? School is canceled, right? Yeah. Now you're at home doing your school. You know, my son was called to a mission to Brazil. Now he's going to Fort Collins, right? I mean, everything is changing constantly. And I was sitting in the temple last night, and my son was doing some of his things, and I was just sitting there by myself, and I thought, man, you know, it's amazing to see the youth in particular right now being willing to just and able to just adapt, right? Adapt to what the new situation is and roll with it. And I think if we have that mindset that we're willing to let the push us to the promised land, right? Drive us to the promised land, and have the faith that we're going to get there. We don't have to be captaining the ship necessarily. We're going to get there if we have the faith. Then it makes it that much, we'll say, easier, right? Not easy.
Yeah.
Easier.
Yeah. I don't know if easier is the right term, but so like, it's like where your focus is will get you through it. You know, yeah. I mean, I shared with you that my little sister passed away, and she was ill for 4 years, you know, before she passed away. And that the illness was every bit as difficult as her passing away. Just because of it's difficult to feed your baby through a tube every day. It's difficult to watch a baby suffer. So my parents focused on the gospel, and that's what got them through that. Now, I think in trials, you have two choices, and I've seen it work the other way. I've seen where families have lost a child, and it caused them to get a divorce because, you know, it was, I don't know, it just took a different route. And so it's, you just got to focus on the Lord, focus on the gospel, the scriptures, and just kind of apply that and just trust that he's going to figure it out in the end. And that's, like I said, it's not easy always to do when you're in it.
Well, that's a remarkable family history that you have, because you're 100% right. There are a lot of families that would be telling a different story.
Yep.
When their baby gets sick, they would be telling how that drove a wedge and that led to the family breaking apart. And a lot of people would look at that circumstance and would be in that circumstance and would raise a fist to heaven and curse God.
Yeah.
Right? And not necessarily be going out looking for answers to why this might happen.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
That's a remarkable faith instinct that your parents had.
Well,
it sounds like your mom was looking. Your dad was out the back door for a while.
Until Tom Killing came along. And then, you know, that's the other remarkable thing about our story and that our little Quincy community is that everything that you talk about in the church when you're growing up, they did it like to the T. You know what I mean? We had great home teachers. We had, you know, we're always doing service projects. There was a great young men, young women's program in our church and all that other stuff. And so we used to, and you know, I attribute some of this to the fact that my parents were pretty young, but I remember going to dances in Susanville. Now, Susanville is usually like maybe an hour drive from Quincy. It would take us 2.5 hours to get home from the dance because we were having a snowball fight the whole way home, where this car full of young men and young women would pull over and hide and just bombard the next car, and then they would be ahead, so they would hide and they would bombard the car. But it was, you know, those same people we're having life conversations with later. So they were able to put maybe their shield down a little bit and have a little bit of fun with the kids. But they were the first, that the dad that was involved with that when I was in high school and I wasn't making very good choices. And, I came down to Anderson my senior year, but I decided I want to go up and graduate with my friends. That's who I lived with, Ed and Connie Garish, the guy that we were snowball fighting with. And they just made a space for me in their son's room and helped me get through high school. Even though, I wasn't making good decisions back then either. And they didn't care. It was that unconditional love from a member of the church. I remember
Tyler, that reminds me of the story of your young men's leader, right, out being the chauffeur for some shenanigans.
Yeah. But those are powerful moments, right? I mean, those are times where I've told leaders that I've worked with in the church for years, that it's great to be powerful when you have a white shirt and tie on. It's probably more powerful to be powerful when you're in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. When you can show that, hey, you can live life and we can also live the gospel at the same time. I think that's a powerful thing. And for a leader to, sometimes last week on our podcast, we talked to someone about formal and informal interviews. Right. And as he was talking about that, I thought I had hours of informal interviews in the cab of a pickup truck with Dave Anderson at the age of 14 on my way to go toilet paper the cute girl's house in the ward. Right. And that was powerful stuff. Powerful stuff.
So Lupe, standing where you are right now in your life, what do you hope people are learning from you? You interact with kids every day, right? You interact with kids they're at that same crossroads that you were at.
Yeah.
Right. What are you saying to them? What do you hope they're learning?
I hope they're learning that they are in control of their own destiny. There's so many kids today don't have hope. And they feel like that they cannot be change agents when they actually can. There's so many systems put in place for kids to just empower themselves. And I've had those conversations with kids, just like, hey, this stuff that you don't like that's going on in your life, you have an opportunity to change that, right? Or go down the same path, but you have to be the one to change it. And I said, and here's where it's going to empower you. When you change that and you go down a different path, then you're going to be able to be in a position where you can reach out and pull some people with you. But until you get there, you're just kind of going to shuffle down that same path that everyone else has. And sometimes those kids will say, well, you don't understand. And I do understand. Like I didn't grow up. I make a pretty decent living compared to what I was raised on. That being said, I had everything a kid could ever want. My parents were both home. My mom stayed home. She cooked. She took care of everything. So I didn't go without. But we didn't go on my kids go on vacations that I never even thought about going on. So getting packed in the car for 6 hours driving down to Magic Mountain, that was a vacation. And we didn't sleep in a hotel. We slept in someone's yard in a sleeping bag. And so
I always love it. I always love it when the kid looks at the guy rocking the shirt and tie and saying, you don't understand.
Yeah. And I always tell them, I said, look, this tie, you're looking at the tie, and the tie hasn't always been here. I know what you're going through because I've been through it.
Yeah, I know that kid, and I used to work in Anderson as well. And on my wall in my office, I had a letter from the Anderson Police Department addressed to my mom. And when I was a kid, there was some shenanigans that went down that landed me in juvenile diversion program. And so this letter, is just outlining what I've done and outlining the community service hours that I've got to log to fix the thing that I did. And so when the kids say, you just don't understand what it's like, and I just point to that letter and be like, yeah, I understand 100%. Been there. That's why you should be listening to me, because I've been there.
Yeah. I ordered my high school transcript just so I could look at it again. Oh my goodness. Look, guy, I understand totally. I mean,
Hey, Lupe, what gives you hope these days?
what gives me hope? Just the only thing that really kind of gives me hope is, and doesn't get me discouraged, is that this isn't the end. It was funny. I had a conversation with some kids in class, and they were saying stuff about, hey, someone said the only thing that is for sure in life or last. They were talking about something lasting, and I said, well, my marriage to my wife is going to last forever. And they're like, no, it's not. It'll be over. But through everything, I think the knowledge that it's not over when we leave this life, that there is life after death, and that we will see. So yeah, I lost my little sister when I was in the 5th grade, but I look forward to the day where it's going to be like a rejoicing when I can put my arms around her and see her again. I found out this summer that my mother and my mother-in-law both had cancer. And so it was kind of a rough summer, but what kind of gets me through that is, you know what? And my mother-in-law she's astounding. My mom has kind of been freed from cancer through a few procedures that she went through, and I think she's going to be fine. But tomorrow, my mother-in-law is having a huge procedure done, and she'll just look you in the eyes and say, look, I've lived a good life, and I'm happy with where I'm at, and guess what, we'll see you again. It's not over here. And so she's amazing. Just that hope and knowledge that this isn't the end, just kind of presses me forward. That's always been one of the things, one of the gospel points that kind of keeps me going. It doesn't end in this life.
Yeah. Well, Lupe, I appreciate those remarks, and I'll be thinking about your mother-in-law tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
thank you. I appreciate that.
And I know that's going to be on your heart. And
for sure.
Man, I can't say enough about the way you showed up for this thing. In one of our pre-show calls, you shared that one of your greatest fears was doing something like this. But you showed up and you were powerful, and you taught us well. So the name of the show is Richest Men in Town. We get that from the closing line of one of our favorite movies, right? It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey, the anti-hero hero. And at the end of the movie, the war hero, the little brother, Harry Bailey, comes back and comes into quite a scene, and he grabs a glass and raises it to toast his big brother George, the richest man in town. We don't have a glass, but Lupe, we do raise a glass to the way that you're living your life. But we're curious, and we end the show, every show, with this same question. What does it mean to you, Lupe Cordova, to be the richest man in town?
Well, to me, it means that you have the opportunity to spend quality time with your family. And for me, that looks like my parents are out on Bowman Road, and I can go visit them anytime, any chance I get. Yesterday was my birthday, and they came over and we had lunch together and ate apple pie, and those are the things that just kind of make me happy, like hanging out with them. Every year we go out to New York, upstate New York, for a month, and all my brother-in-law and his family, and my wife and my mother and father-in-law, and we just hang out at the lake house for a month, and just that quality time that we have together just kind of makes me the richest man alive. I have the greatest in-laws in the world. I have the greatest parents in the world. I have the greatest wife in the world. Knock on wood, I have the greatest kids in the world, and that's what makes me the richest man alive, and gets me up in the morning and sends me off to work, and I mean, there's nothing I wouldn't do for that small group of people that kind of keep me going.
Well, we're proud to know you, brother. and we're proud to call you a friend of the program. And what that means is when we call you, don't screen our phone calls, man. We'll be calling you to come back. I mean, there's some unfinished business here. I got in my notes that you taught high school sex ed. That alone is an episode, right?
Right.
Okay, you want me to tell you a quick story about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a student teacher, right? I have 2 classes, okay? I have first period personal growth, which has a 6-week sex ed unit in it. And there's no curriculum. You teach what you want. And then I have a geography class, right? Which has a book. Well, so I say to the teacher, my master teacher, what do I teach? And she said, well, whatever you think is important. I'm like there's no curriculum? No. I'm like, all right. So I'm staying up late one night and I'm trying to do a lesson plan. And I say to my wife, I say, what should I teach these kids about tomorrow? And she goes, well, look in your book, your sex ed book. I'm like, I don't have a sex ed book. She goes, sure you do. It's the one with the condom sticker on it. I said, what are you talking about? Why would I have a condom sticker on my book? And so I pull out my geography book and I look at it, and sure enough, there's a condom sticker and it says, just wear it. And then I remember a month earlier, a student had walked up to me and said, Mr. Cordova, can I put this sticker on your book? And I thought it was a seatbelt sticker. And I said, sure, put it on there. And he looked at me, and I remember him looking at me and saying, you're so cool. Slap the sticker on there. So I walked around with it for a month, my geography book with a condom sticker. I'm a brand new teacher. And so I called Mr. Howard and I said, Mr. Howard, did you know that there's a condom sticker on my book? And he goes, yeah, it's been there for a month. I was wondering why you had it on there. I go, why didn't you say something?
That's great, man.
I know you got. Hey, you're teaching high school sex ed. You got a ton of great stories, man.
That's a riot, man. But listen, Lupe. Look, I got a lot of notes that I wrote down tonight, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the time. You and I haven't met before, and I'm grateful for the time meeting tonight. And the time we got to spend together tonight. I mean, I've learned a lot. I love your heart, Lupe. Talking about your kids is inspiring, and the journey is inspiring. I love it. I'm sitting here listening to you talk about Laren Johnson, right? And talk about your mom and dad, talk about your in-laws. You talk about Ed Garish and,
Mama Connie.
What's that?
And Mama Connie.
Ed and Connie Garish.
Yeah.
Look, you've done these people proud, and I'm grateful for our time together. You, Lupe Cordova, are one of the richest men in town, and I'm just grateful to know you and be in your presence tonight. So thanks a ton, man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to do it again because sex ed stories is what we need, right? So thanks, Lupe.
Just wear it. Just wear it.
Have a good night, my friend.
See you, Lupe.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.